So hello, welcome to the August 2022 version of the Symbiota support group. We're going to do some quick introductions. You may have met many of us, but we are going to reintroduce ourselves. My name is Katie Pearson. I am a project and data manager for the Symbiota support hub, and we have many others from our team here. Jen, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm just a community liaison for the Symbiota Support Hub.
And Lindsay?
Hi, I'm Lindsay Walker, and I am the community manager for the Support Hub.
Nico?
Yeah, hi everybody. I manage the team at ASU for the Symbiota Support Hub.
Laura?
Hi everyone, I'm a biodiversity informatician, and I develop some of the Symbiota workflows and tools.
Samantha?
Hi everyone. I work with the international communities that use Symbiota. I am Samantha.
And then Greg?
Hi everyone, my name is Greg Post, and I'm the basically the system administrator and programmer for Symbiota.
And is Ed here?
He's trying to get connected, but he's having issues with the host link. So I don't know if someone has an opportunity to resend him a host link.
Okay.
And then
I also see that Gil Nelson is here. Gil, you want to introduce yourself? You're muted at the moment.
That's probably the better way to do it. Thank you, Katie, very much. I appreciate it. I'm Gil Nelson, and I'm the director of IDIC Bio and a huge fan of Symbiota.
Thanks a lot. And we'll make sure that, oh, Ed is here. Ed, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Ed Gilbert. Been associated with Symbiota for a long time, for decades. Mostly do programming, development, and building databases and portals.
Great. And I would just like to provide a little bit of context for those of you who are new here. So the Symbiota support group is a service that the Symbiota Support Hub provides to the community for anybody using a portal, either for live content management or snapshot curation. And the team is based at ASU, and this has all been made possible by IDIC Bio Phase 3 funding. And so we're really excited about that. And services like this and training and documentation are all made possible because of that funding.
All right. Without further ado, I will hand it over to Lindsay for some important announcements.
Sure, thanks, Katie. So we have a few announcements at the beginning. We've already done our reintroductions, but just if you're not aware, IDIC Bio's Biodiversity Digitization Conference is happening virtually at the end of September. In order to participate, it's free, but you do need to go to their Eventbrite page to register. So the link to do that is on this page. We'll put it in the chat. And if you're not familiar, this is sort of the rebranded summit. So the summit's not happening now, it's BioDigiCon, and we're excited to participate in that. They are looking for lightning presentations, I believe. So if you're interested in contributing, I think they're still open to accepting talks and things like that. So feel free to reach out to IDIC Bio if you need more help with that or interested. And then, of course, Symbiota will be there. On day 3, we'll be giving a workshop on digitization workflows in Symbiota. I will be there, Katie will be there, as well as other members from our team. So if that's of interest, mark your calendars for day 3, 11 a.m. Eastern. And then another conference that's coming up is the Biodiversity Information Standards Conference, also known as TADWIG. That's happening both virtually and in person at the kind of mid-end of October. The in-person component's happening in Bulgaria, but then virtually all around the world. So if you want to register for that, our link to that is also on the slide. And then we just want to take a moment to pause and just ask, is there anyone out there who has announcements that they'd like to make to this group? If not, you can also put things in the chat too, and we can come back to it later. There will be some discussion time at the end. Let's see.
All right, well, feel free to put those in the chat.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. So reminders, we send emails from the help desk, but also make sure that you're checking your spam. So you've probably seen some mailer lights come out. I often press send on those, and we just want to make sure that they're not going to everyone's spam. So for example, we sent out a portal communications update a few weeks ago that had some important information about changes that are happening in various portals, about checklists and whatnot. And so you definitely, if you didn't see that come through, highly suggest that you go through your spam to make sure it didn't end up in there, and maybe reach out to us if it did, and we can try to fix that on our end. If we'll work through it, and I can send it to you again. But just so you know, there are emails coming through that sort of like newsletter style that hopefully you're all getting. And then you can also contact us, help@symbiota.org. We'll take you to our help desk, and somebody will respond from our team as soon as we possibly can. And another reminder, if you're not familiar, so we have written documentation and recordings to help everyone use Symbiota. And so Symbiota Docs is on our website, symbiota.org/docs. And then the bit link will link you to our recordings. Great resources to help you get started or do potentially more complicated things. But if you haven't been to those websites, I highly recommend that you check them out. And then lastly, if you're new to the support group, all of the recordings from these meetings and then like future topics get posted to our website. And then you can also go to this page if you want to suggest topics. We also have a survey for if you want to ask questions in advance. We'll check it before the meeting. So anything Symbiota support group related while we're not in this meeting, you can kind of get the updates on our website. And then with that, I will hand it off to Katie, who's going to be talking today about the taxonomic thesauri in various Symbiota portals.
Thanks, Lindsay. And I'm sure Ed and Laura will be chiming in at multiple occasions because this is a pretty broad-ranging topic, and I'm really excited to hopefully kind of dial down on the important things that often lead to some confusion throughout the portals and people using the portals. So we're going to talk about several different aspects of the taxonomic thesauri. We're going to talk about how it's structured, so what it actually means to have something in or not in the taxonomic thesaurus, the purpose, so why a taxonomic thesaurus exists. I'm going to briefly mention some known issues and things that we're working on. I'm also going to show how to edit the taxonomic thesaurus, and then I'm going to also talk about how the taxonomic cleaning tool interfaces with the taxonomic thesaurus. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about what the taxonomic, first of all, what it is and what it looks like. So the taxonomic thesaurus is a list of all the taxonomic names in a portal, basically. And those names can be interconnected to one another based on synonymy or based on a hierarchical relationship. So this is just an example of, let me bring up an actual portal. So here is the Consortium of California Herbaria portal, for example, and the taxonomic thesaurus can be browsed if you go into the sitemap. And if you scroll down, there will be Taxonomic Tree Viewer right here and Taxonomy Explorer. Those do very similar things. They just allow you to look for taxa in the portal.
Katie, will everybody be able to see that regardless, like editors and administrators, or do you have to be an administrator to see that?
You will be able to see it if you don't even have to be logged in, I believe. Okay. So there's all these things down here that you need administrative access to do, but this is one of the basic aspects of looking at the sitemap. So if you click Taxonomic Tree Viewer, for example, then you'll see that this is the very basis of this taxonomic thesaurus, at least. And so here are my kingdoms. I can look at the whole structure of it. So these are the one down from kingdom, whatever that looks like in this portal. Or if you just search in this portal for a species, and then you click Display Taxonomic Tree, then it will take you down the whole list. So these are all the higher taxonomic groups that lead up to this one species. And so this is a screenshot from SciNet. So that's why there's a little purple background. But when you look at the taxonomic tree, what you're seeing here is anything that is not in these brackets, that is an accepted taxonomic name according to the Taxonomic Thesaurus. Anything that is under or one indent in is either a synonym of that previous or higher up taxon, or if it is not in these brackets, it is a child. So if you think of the parent is just one taxonomic group up from the child. For example, the genus is the parent of the species, or a variety is the child of the species. So it's very simplistic overall, the taxonomic thesaurus in Symbiota portals. You just have a long list of taxa, and each taxon must be linked to a parent and an accepted taxon. So in this case, we have this Tamias alpinus. The parent taxon is Tamias, which is the genus of Tamias alpinus. And the accepted taxon in this case is Neotamias alpinus. But the accepted taxon can be itself. So in this giant list of taxonomic names that exist, you can have the taxon name be, in this case, Neotamias. The parent is, the taxon is Neotamias alpinus. The parent is Neotamias. And the accepted taxon is the same thing as the taxon name. So in this case, it's Neotamias alpinus. So that's kind of the bread and butter of what the taxonomic thesaurus looks like. It's not super, super complicated, but that's why you're like, if you're trying to find, really complicated taxonomic relationships based on taxonomic theory and, what is a species, what is this species concept, that's not necessarily well captured in this relatively simplistic view of parent accepted taxa. So here's just kind of a diagrammatic view of that. So when you have a taxon, it can have one or many children. When you have a taxon, it can have one or many synonyms as well. This means that a single taxon can only have one parent, and it can only have one accepted taxon. So it can have lots of synonyms that are synonyms of an accepted taxon, but only one can be accepted in one thesaurus. So just looking again at that view, here's a synonym because it's in brackets, and here's a child because it is indented more, but not in brackets. Okay, so that's the basic structure of a taxonomic thesaurus in a Symbiota portal. And this relates to the purpose of the taxonomic thesaurus. Why is it so simplistic? And that is because form follows function. So the reason why it's so simplistic is because it was made for a very specific purpose. And that purpose was to search for specimens and observations. So we're trying to enable people to find the specimens that they're expecting to find when they're doing a search. It helps with digitization. So we have a taxonomic thesaurus so that people don't always have to type Eschscholtzia californica every time they find a poppy. And it also helps to create checklists. So we have all of these specimens that are linked to taxonomic names. And that way, when you create a checklist, then all those taxonomic names can be glommed together and made into one list from those specimens. So as an example, if I go back to a portal and I just do a search, I'm going to use poppies again because I know they have lots of synonyms. So let's just look for, poppies in Oregon. And if I do a search, you'll see that because I allowed all the synonyms, I should go back here and show you, because I included all the synonyms in my search, when I click list display, it will tell me all of the taxonomic names potentially in my list of specimens that are being resulted in this search. So if a collection had a specimen that said Eschscholtzia californica variety luxurians, or if they had Eschscholtzia menziesiana, those would all be resulted in my search because those have been listed according to the Taxonomic Thesaurus as synonyms of this taxon that I searched. So this is, the Taxonomic Thesaurus is trying to enable a user to not have a necessarily very nuanced understanding of, oh, I need to search this variety and this synonym and that synonym to get all the potential specimens that I want. They just can search one taxon, and then all the synonyms and the children of that taxon will show up in those search results. So in most portals, the Taxonomic Thesaurus is not necessarily meant to be a taxonomic authority. So if you see that, oh my goodness, they listed this one specific oak as a synonym of this other oak, what taxonomic thesaurus or what taxonomic authority are they basing that off of? That's old taxonomy from 2008. Well, yeah, because we're not necessarily like Plants of the World Online. These are generally meant for data discoverability, and often they've been built from other tools that exist, and they require constant updating because I'm sure all of you guys know that taxonomy changes constantly. So it's not necessarily within the purview of the portal managers to be updating that. Depends on the portal. Taxonomic authority is generally a job for things like worms and Plants of the World Online. That being said, you could use a Symbiota portal to curate a nicely managed taxonomy. So for example, the Consortium of North American Lichen Herbaria has a pretty well curated taxonomic thesaurus. So most of the taxonomy is up to date with most recent literature. But again, that's portal specific. Often it depends on the size of the portal, the size of the taxonomy that's being managed. So if you find taxonomic discrepancies, just send them to the portal managers or to the Symbiota support hub, and we can help fix those. We're not promising to be taxonomic authorities. Okay, so that leads to a few common issues that are known in the Taxonomic Thesaurus. Because we're not an authority and because names are changing and being added constantly, most thesauri are not exhaustive. One of the ways that they are created when a portal is first initiated is the Taxonomic Thesaurus is usually built off of what specimens are coming into the portal. So when you create a portal and then an herbarium puts all their specimen data into that portal, then we use the taxonomic cleaning tool to actually pull all the taxonomic information from another taxonomic resource. So often we pull from Catalog of Life for plants usually, but other taxonomic resources for other collections communities. And so we're often getting just the taxonomy that is necessary to support the specimens that are in a portal. Which means that these often need to be updated constantly. And so whenever people start digitizing like specimens from another country, we often get people saying like, oh no, we have tons of like this one genus that just isn't showing up. We're like, oh yeah, because it only lives in Brazil and there's no other Brazilian collections here. So if you're finding that that's the case in your portal, just contact us or use the taxonomic cleaning tool on your own specimens because you have the ability to add taxa to the taxonomic thesaurus using that tool if you're a collection administrator. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. The taxonomic thesauri do not necessarily handle hybrids or cultivars super well yet. Like you still need to link a hybrid or a cultivar to its parent taxon. And so you kind of have to decide which one is going to be called the parent taxon. But I think that that's still, you could just link it to the genus and then it doesn't really necessarily have a linkage to the two technically parent taxa in a hybridization event. So development on that realm, I believe is coming or is hopeful, but right now, if you find problems with hybrids and cultivars, that's pretty common. Also, because the taxonomic thesaurus does not allow duplications of one name, that means that we don't deal with homonyms necessarily super well. So if you have a same genus and species of mouse that shares a name with a plant, then you might have to deal with that a little bit differently. Usually you can make it work, but if you're finding like, oh, I need to add this scientific name that has this authorship, but also this scientific name that has a different authorship, that can be a little bit tricky, and we're aware of that. Okay, so some issues that you might find are just because of mistakes or problems or incompleteness within the taxonomic thesaurus. So what we've gotten asked or notified of in some cases is that a taxon is appearing in a search for a different taxon, but it shouldn't be, or vice versa. So someone searches, Quercus agrifolia, and then like the blue oak also shows up. They're like, wait, why are both of these showing up in my search? Well, it might be that in the taxonomic thesaurus, the blue oak is listed as a synonym of that first thing that you searched. That might be a mistake. So that's a case of wrong synonymy. Or you might find that a taxon isn't appearing in a search for the parent taxon. So there's a couple of ways that that might happen. So if you find that there's like a certain variety that isn't showing up, or a subspecies that isn't showing up when you search for the species, then that might be because that variety or subspecies doesn't exist in the taxonomic thesaurus at all. Or it might just be mapped to the wrong parent taxon. More likely it's just not found in the taxonomic thesaurus. And Ed is putting some important caveats and extra information into the chat, so make sure that you're looking at that too. You also might find that taxa are entered or listed under multiple different spellings. Sometimes these are legitimate orthographic variants. Sometimes they're just misspellings that have been added into the portal somehow. So this may be done on purpose to enhance data discoverability, because maybe there's kind of an equal split of whether people use two I's or AE in the taxonomic name. And they've just kind of arbitrarily said, okay, this one's going to be the accepted and this one's going to be a synonym. So just got to know that, again, we're not saying that the double I's is the way that everyone needs to go. We're just saying this is going to be the accepted one for the purpose of data discoverability. All right, so any questions? Actually, we should probably leave questions for the end, but I'm going to look at one. Mary asks, is it searching for synonyms via common names? You mentioned blue oaks, hence this question. No, it will not search based off of common names. It doesn't like look through all the common names and say, oh, I want anything that has been listed as a common name within this. How can a person, oh, sorry, go ahead, Laura.
If you search for vernaculars, then it will look for them.
Yeah, good point. So if you are doing a specifically vernacular or common name search, then yes, you will get a bunch of things that maybe you wouldn't have necessarily called synonyms, but it's because maybe that common name is shared across many scientific names. Jennifer asks, how can a person who is not associated with a collection as an administrator add to or help cleaning a taxonomic thesaurus in a portal? Excellent question. That depends on the portal, but often you just need to get in touch with the portal administrators, or if you don't know who that is, you can get in touch with the Symbiota Support Hub and we can put you in touch with those portal administrators. And then we can hopefully loop you into helping that. That is a big need in the community, to have people who are taxonomically savvy and who can help with editing the taxonomic thesaurus, which is exactly what I'm going to show you to do right now.
And so, sorry to interrupt, but just to add, there is a specific permission that you can give users that are signed in, but are not necessarily, associated with a particular collection or a particular project. But you can give them this one permission, which is like can edit taxonomic thesaurus or something like that. So if you are a portal administrator and you want to know how to do that, that's how you do it. Just a specific permission you can assign to a user.
Yes, exactly. So there are multiple levels of permission. And one of those, or actually two of them, there's a taxon administrator and a taxon editor permissions. If you give someone taxon administrator permissions, or if they're a super administrator, which means they can basically do anything in the portal, then those people can edit the taxonomic thesaurus. So that would be, let's see. Well, I have super administrator permissions, but if I looked at my own user permissions here, then you can see that I am a taxon profile editor in this case. I'm also a super administrator, but I could give someone just taxonomy editor permissions. So that's a way that even if you're not affiliated with the collection, but you're just like, super awesome taxonomist, or, even like taxonomist of one specific clade, and you just want to clean up that clade, then reach out to the portal administrator. That would be a great use of your guys' expertise. So let me go back into my sitemap. So if you wanted to edit a taxonomic or a taxon or add a taxon, then I would go into the taxonomic tree viewer, make sure you're logged in. If you're logged in and you don't see these pencils next to the taxon name, that means that you don't have that permissions level necessary. So let's just go to some taxonomic name here. You can look for the taxon here, and then you can click the pencil icon to the right of it. And similarly to the structure, it's relatively simple, simplistic to enter the data into the record, into the taxonomic thesaurus. So this is an already entered one that, let's just say I wanted to edit it. If I went over into this pencil button and I click that, then you'll see this is how the data are entered into the taxonomic thesaurus. We're given a unit name. You can have, in this case, if it was a hybrid, I could put an X in front of it. And then you have your unit name 2, unit name 3, which might here have like variety or subspecies or a forma, whatever. And then you put that third element of the unit name. You put an author in, you tell it which rank that is. And so that's going to automatically nest it within the hierarchy. And when you're first adding a new species, so I'm going to click this add a new taxon button. When you first add a new species or a new taxon, then it will ask for all those same information, but then it also requires you to enter a parent taxon. So if I was entering some new species of Calicortus, let's just call it Calicortus juncus, then it would automatically parse out, say, okay, I think that I have your first unit name, your second unit name, then I'd have to put in my authorship. I'd have to make sure that this species or this taxon rank matches what I expect it to. And then it's going to automatically look for a parent taxon for me. And in this case, it says, okay, because you have a species, I have this genus that I think belongs to this species. And in this case, it's correct. I got Calicortus. That's what I want. If it had not come up, you could start typing and you must select it from the taxonomic tree. You can add any notes, you can add a source. I highly recommend adding some information about, yourself. You're saying like added by Pearson using this specific DOI from a taxonomic paper, for example, or maybe I use Plants of the World Online and you can put the link there. This is also where you can decide whether it is a protected species. So this means that any specimens that are mapped to this taxon are going to have their locality details hidden from a user who does not have viewing permissions. And then this is also where you can say whether this is an accepted taxon or if it is a synonym of a different taxon. So I could say, no, this is actually one that was published, but then, or that wasn't published, or that is now synonymized with something else. You could click not accepted, and then you could just add that accepted taxon name here. And then you can provide notes about why it wasn't accepted as well. Okay, so back to my editing. From here, you can also edit whether you can change the parent taxon, or you can change whether it's the accepted taxon or whether it has children taxa, for example. So if I go to the taxonomic status tab, then you'll see that its current status is accepted and it does not have any synonyms. I could change that. If I clicked this pencil icon, I could change the parent taxon here. Or if I wanted to change this to, let's say that this is not accepted anymore, then I'm going to click this pencil icon and then I'm going to say, okay, the actual accepted taxon is some other species. And again, you can give notes for that. One tricky thing about this is if you are editing a taxon, actually, let's go look for an example. If you're editing a taxon that has lots of children taxa and or synonyms, so in this case, we have tons of synonyms. If I said, no, Eschscholzia californica is no longer the accepted taxon for, or the accepted name. If I wanted to change this to not accepted, then it would change all of these synonyms to be synonymous with that new name that I am saying is the accepted name. So you got to make sure that this taxon concept is actually lines up with your expectations that, okay, everything that's nested under this species should now belong to the accepted name that I'm going to give to this taxon. And if that is not the case, then you can individually go into these children taxa or these synonym taxa and change the parent for that one. So it gets a little bit complicated if you're dealing with a taxon that has lots of other links to it, but you just kind of have to think about, okay, to what parent does this one belong? To what parent does this one belong? And then you can work your way through those. Here you can also view the hierarchy. You can view all the children taxa that belong to that taxon, and then you can attempt to delete that taxon. Don't recommend doing much deleting. You probably need to check with a portal administrator before you do that, because that taxon is going to be linked potentially to many other taxa and potentially many specimens and images and vernaculars and text descriptions. And all of those need to be relinked to whatever taxon you are saying is the up-to-date or the accepted taxon. So just know that there's a little bit more complications if you want to delete a taxon. Okay, an important point is that if you make changes in the taxonomic thesaurus, they are not going to automatically change the taxonomic names of actual specimens. So if I went into my editor and I said, no, it's actually Eschscholzia californicus, and if I clicked submit edits right then, all the specimens in the database that say Eschscholzia californica are going to continue to say Eschscholzia californica. So the spelling that you make in here is not going to automatically apply to all of the specimens in other people's collections, which is nice because that means that, you know, a taxonomic administrator isn't changing everyone's specimen data because those varieties or variations might be there on purpose. But just know that changes in the taxonomic thesaurus do not change the taxonomic names of specimens. The same goes for if you change a taxonomic name to be a synonym of a different name. It's not going to change people's specimens to now be that accepted name. So the Symbiota portals are not necessarily taxonomic resolution services. You can't really throw in your specimen names and get a list of the accepted names out. But there are other services that do that. So let us know, we can put you in touch with that. Okay, and now I'm going to briefly touch on how the taxonomic cleaning tool interacts with the taxonomic thesaurus, and then I'll go ahead and get to your guys' additional questions. And I know that there will be lots of questions that people will have, and hopefully Ed, Laura, and I will have some answers for you. Okay, so the taxonomic cleaning tool is a per collection tool that you can use to edit the taxonomic names within your collection. So this has to be accessed through a specific collection. So I'm going to go, for example, into the Cal Poly collection. And so from here, a collection administrator, so that's someone who has administrator permissions, can use this tool to make sure that all the taxonomic names that are in applied to my specimens are also found in the taxonomic thesaurus. Why is this important? Well, the same reason that the taxonomic thesaurus exists, and that's for data discoverability. So if I had a bunch of taxonomic names that are not mapped to the thesaurus, then they potentially might not be searchable when people look for like the genus name or the species name. So let's go here. I'll go into my data cleaning tools. And this point that I was making here is that when you make changes in the taxonomic cleaning tool, it does change the taxonomic names that are on your specimens. So a taxonomic editor can make changes in the thesaurus that won't affect the specimens, but an administrator can batch change their own specimen scientific names. Okay, so back into my collection control panel. So if I go down to data cleaning tools, then there's a data cleaning tool down at the bottom called taxonomy. And I'm going to click analyze taxonomic names. And this is going to tell me you have 366 names and to which 487 specimens belong that currently are not mapped to the taxonomic thesaurus. And what that means is if someone searched for the parent taxon of these 487 specimens, they may not be able to find those specimens. So if I'm saying, oh man, I don't know what those taxonomic names are, well, you can go and look at them right now by just clicking your target kingdom. So in this case, I'm in a plant portal, so I'm going to click Plante. You can tell it how many names to process per run. So I'm just going to look at 10 to start. And then I'm going to click Catalog of Life as my taxonomic resource. So what this tool does is it looks through all the names, at least starting at A, it will look through, in this case, 10 names, and it will compare those to the taxonomic resource that's listed here that I have checked. And it will say, okay, did I find this in Catalog of Life? Oh, no, I didn't. Then it's some name that I don't know what it belongs to. And then it will give you some options for, do you mean this taxon? Do you mean this taxon? Do you mean this taxon? And then maybe you don't, and you have to add that to the thesaurus. If it does find that taxonomic name in your taxonomic resource, it will automatically pull that taxon into the thesaurus along with any of the higher taxonomy necessary for it to link into the taxonomic thesaurus. So really nice, you know, if you find a species that belongs to a genus that doesn't exist in your thesaurus, it will pull in that species and that genus and that family if necessary. So it's really nice. So if I click Analyze Taxonomic Names, it will go one by one. And you'll see what it does is, okay, I found this species and I looked for it in Catalog of Life. I didn't find it in Catalog of Life, so I'm gonna try to find something that might match in the thesaurus. Well, I found this one, is that what you mean? And so it's gonna do that for each of the species that I have here. And so in this case, I have, okay, Acacia arendria. Maybe it should be arenaria. I can click on this one specimens in this case, and I could look at it in closer detail, or I could actually look at the specimen in my collection, and you can decide whether this scientific name needs to be changed. In this case, that is exactly what is on my specimen label. So I'm not going to change it in my taxonomic thesaurus in this case. But if I go down here a little bit, I'll see some that say, okay, this says Acer rubrum L. Oh, someone put the authorship into the scientific name field on accident. So I'm going to map this, remap to this taxon. And what that does is it puts this in the scientific name field of those one specimens. And because the authorship exists in the taxonomic thesaurus, it will automatically apply that authorship to that specimen, but in the correct field. So it's no longer in the scientific name field, it's now in the author field. So that's the same reason that if you had a specimen and you start typing in the scientific name and you select one, that's why the authorship and the family names will show up automatically, is because it pulled that from the taxonomic thesaurus and threw it in there. And then further down here, it found this scientific name was in Catalog of Life, but it is a not accepted name. So it added the accepted name and the parent and the name itself into the taxonomic thesaurus automatically for me. So great, it added that taxonomic name for me. And now at least one more of my specimens is searchable according to the thesaurus, or according to any random search. So if someone searched for whatever the family of Acidanthera is, then they would now be able to find this one specimen, and they previously would not have been able to do that. So you can just run this on all of your scientific names at one time. You could just say, all right, 400, keep going. And it will just, you know, take a half an hour or an hour, however long. But it will automatically add anything that was found in Catalog of Life into your taxonomic thesaurus for your portal. So this is really helpful for both you and for any other collections in your portal, because they might also have those specimens from other countries that they hadn't previously digitized. And then those scientific names will be searchable. All right, that was not an exhaustive overview of the taxonomic cleaning tool itself, but we do have some pretty great resources, including a step-by-step video on our Symbiota docs page. So you can definitely check that out there. And now I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen and open questions. Let me go ahead and open up what questions we have already, but I think the team has been answering those pretty well.
And I guess from anybody from the team, if you want to add some clarification to the questions you've answered in the chat, will you guys start there?
Definitely. I see James has his hand up. James, you want to ask a question?
Yes, I'm driving. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so this might be a bug on our portal, but when I use the taxonomy cleaning tool, it does not overwrite or add authors or families into the specimens that it has changed.
Interesting. It should do that, right, Ed?
Jessica Lynn says that she's noticed the same thing lately. And Jessica, what portal are you on?
support.
And I have an extension of this, and that is that it would be really nice that when you would at least have the option to add those to the queue of annotations to print out, because the situation and now it has to go into the determination. There's no spend is actually relevant.
We're losing you, James, but I think I got your point. That being like, if you are actually changing a scientific name in using the taxonomic cleaning tool, it would be useful to have a way to mark those as needing to be physically annotated with that new scientific name.
Nation history currently.
Yeah, it's not listed in the determination history because it's not generally considered an annotation. It's usually for mistakes, but you could choose to change those as an actual determination change instead of using the taxonomic cleaning tool.
But if you were using the taxonomic cleaning tool and had the option of saying make annotation labels, especially if doing a batch, be nice.
Yeah, you could do, I mean, that is a possible tool that could exist. You could just go into the batch determinations tool, and I think you could probably search by that taxonomic name, but you're right, that is an additional step. Dina, you have a question?
I had a question in the chat too. In terms of making nomenclatural changes at both the genus and the family levels, could you demonstrate how you do that in the batch process?
Yeah, so can you give me an example of that? Like if you're changing the synonymy of an entire genus, or? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I lost you for a second. Yeah, so, let's say we've been very tardy in making, let's say, breaking up large families like the Scrophulariaceae into its segregates. And so if we're about to do that, how do we actually make those changes at the batch level? So Orobank case, changing certain taxa and genera to, let's say, the Orobancaceae.
So are you making those on your specimens, or are you saying that those are in your portal?
Well, we're making those changes at the physical level, and we want to reflect those changes. Even though they're cut in synonymy, we just want to make sure our instance of Symbiota is current. So how would we, let's say, take Pedicularis and Castanea and some of the other things and make them into the Orobancaceae in our instance of Symbiota?
If you're talking about doing it on a collection level, then that would be something you would use the batch determinations tool for.
Okay.
But if you're making a lot of changes within the taxonomic thesaurus, so you're like, okay, I need to look at this whole family and see what all the accepted taxa are, then I think that you would just do that through the taxonomic tree. So you would go in and say, okay, tree viewer, let's look at let's look at all the Castaneias. And then you could look at the Castanea genus, and you could see what are all the children. Here are all the children. Here are all of the accepted names for all of those children. And you could individually say, okay, now this one needs to be mapped to this other scientific name. This one needs to be mapped to this other scientific name. And you could view that at a family level too. It would just be a very long list.
Katie, I was going to say this is most often the case where you're looking at family level changes. So for example, you want to take certain genera out of one family and put them into another family.
Yeah, then you would probably look at that on a family level and then move those genera. And because the taxonomic thesaurus is so simplistic in that you just have one taxon and it has a parent and it has an accepted, like once you change one node, you move that one accepted genus into a totally different family, all of the taxa that are children of that taxon are going to go into that family too.
Can you show us then for the genus Castanea?
I have some input here. So there's, if the thesaurus is set up, like Katie was talking about, if it's set up where that genus is in the right family, someone searching for your specimens, if they do a search on the correct family, like penstemons, was it Phragmaceae, they'll get the search correct, even if your collection is not listed within that. So the thesaurus is a tool that helps correct that within the database so that the collections don't have to be updated all the time. But if you're rearranging your herbarium and you're breaking up the scrophs into different cabinets, into the correct families, rearranging your herbarium, you do have a listing of the family within your database, and you could batch update that using the batch editor tools. And that's probably the easiest way to do it, but it's probably not a batch determination, because you're not really changing the identification. You're just changing the hierarchy, the family assignments. So does that make sense?
That does. And then, then within that, of course, there's some things that then need to be some names need to be subsumed into others at the species level. So it sounds like that too, if those are already known at the thesaurus level, it's again just something that I would use the batch editor to do in terms of changing the names.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so there are some great, and I think Laura shared, there's some great documentation about how to use the batch editor, but in general, it's over here under the data editor control panel. And you could click add batch determinations. And you could say like, okay, I want all of my Mimulus guttatus, for example. Just like show me all of the Mimulus that I have. Okay, all of these need to be erythranthe now. So you could just say, apply this first specific name to it, whatever it is. And you can even add those to the print queue, and then you can print those right off, put them on your physical specimens. So that would be if it is actually like a taxonomic change, so a change in synonymy. And then if you just wanted to change the family, and let's say you don't agree with the way the taxonomic thesaurus is set up, like it says that Scrophulariaceae has everything, and you're like, no, I actually want to break it up into other things. What Ed was saying is that if you go into your edit existing occurrence records and you use the batch editing tool, which I believe is only available to administrators, you can actually change the family without making that like a determination change, because you're not actually changing the identity of it, you're just changing the family in your specimen records. So that's if you don't necessarily want to follow the family designation of the portal. It's not going to change, oh, sorry.
Or if you want to update your family, because I think in her situation, she has everything in the scrophs. So in her collection table, she has scrophs listed, but she wants to go into the penstemons and change it to what the thesaurus is saying now. Mm-hmm. The thesaurus isn't going to automatically do that, but you could do it in batch using this tool.
Yeah, so let's say I wanted to change all of my penstemons. So first I would just start with, okay, scientific name starts with penstemon. And then I look at a table and I have 394 penstemons. And you can see I have some differences in my database here, or in Jen's database. And if I wanted to batch edit, I could say, okay, using this batch edit tool, anything that is in this table right now, so these 394 records, I could change the family from Plantagenaceae to Scrophulariaceae or whatever. And it's going to apply to those things that I'm looking in the table right now. And the nice thing is that if I'm not going to make this change, but if I wanted to do this and I clicked batch update field, it will say, hey, you're going to apply this to 342 records. Is that what you're expecting? And if it said, 10,000, I could be like, oh no, that's not what I expected. And then I don't do it. So there is one little brief check.
Katie, could you please just show them again the difference between this editor interface and the nomenclatural editor? Because these are two different links.
Yeah. So one difference between this and the actual batch determinations is that you can't change scientific names here. You can only change to the level of family. If you wanted to actually change the scientific names, those have to be called determinations. And so what that would do is it would show up in the determination history. So if you use the batch determinations tool, it will actually show up in the determination history of someone said it was this taxon name, then this taxon name, then this taxon name. Whereas that would not necessarily show up if you just use the batch editing tool. That would show up in your review verify occurrence edits. So the changes that you make using the batch editing tool will show up in this field, but they won't show up as determinations. Okay, I see a couple more comments in the chat. Just some comments. Any other questions? Great questions, everybody. Any other comments, Ed or Laura?
Did you show, I don't think you commented on the ability to batch upload a taxonomic data file, did you?
Oh, I don't think I did. Ed, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, it might be too finicky if you're not, if you're kind of scared of messing up the data in your portal, but you can always use our sample portal to practice things if you're scared to do it in your portal. I'm going to paste the link in the chat.
And we can potentially facilitate it because it's more one of those one-offs that you could, again, submit a help request. I think the use case here, correct me if I'm wrong, sorry, Laura, is like a batch of major changes to the taxonomy, or additions where the UI, the user interface, would seem really cumbersome, right?
Right.
In those
cases, add a bunch of taxa at once, or if you're polling a new taxonomic authority that you want to completely overwrite what you have in your portal, or if you don't have a taxonomic authority to look up and you want to create your own tree from scratch, and you want to do it in bulk instead of doing it manually taxon by taxon or node by node, you can do that via a batch upload data file, taxonomic data file, which is a special CSV with a certain field that have to be added to that spreadsheet. So we can, Symbiota can perform the linkage of the tree. So it will take the node and put it in the correct parent and generate the thesaurus, the linked thesaurus that way. So that's a possibility that we can explore in the future. But that, I think we would recommend that kind of tool for now, just for those like fringe cases where you either want to do a radical change in your thesaurus, or you don't have any authority to use and you want to bulk create your own. Or we use it at the SSH, we have used it before to generate non-biological trees. If you are creating like a geological tree, taxonomic thesaurus or objects. So it's like a very fringe case. So
generally reach out to your portal administrators or the Symbiota support hub if you want to make batch changes to the taxonomy.
Managing thesauri is rather complicated, and batch loading is rather complicated, so it should definitely be done through the taxonomic, through the portal manager directly.
Yeah, and then Kathy had a great question. Kathy said, I don't have editor permission, but do I need to ask someone to add or change a name in the thesaurus? And I would say if you think there's just going to be a few here and there, just go ahead and email your portal administrators or the Symbiota Support Hub for help with that. But if you're like, no, I really want to curate this one, family or clade or whatever, then you can get in touch with the portal admins about becoming an editor. Nico.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the sort of notion that if we look at all of the portals, there's some sort of range, very mature taxonomies versus really needs more sort of hands on the body to be editing. And I think the reality of how that gets handled is really within the portal communities, right? So if I happen to be a manager of a portal and I really see the portal taxonomy to be in need of curation and more eyes on the ball, then I would probably adopt a slightly more open policy towards giving folks access, because I want that kind of engagement. Ultimately lifts up the data quality if you have more eyes on the ball, and then also people who can directly edit. If on the other hand, my portal taxonomy is much more mature, and there's also an established, shall we say, social structure of who should do what, then I might be a little bit more reserved with giving those kinds of permissions out. And the software and the way it's designed doesn't really alleviate you from making those kinds of assessments and then organizing or managing your portal accordingly. We can support either way, but at the end of the day, there's also supposed to be a built-in degree of autonomy and ultimately empowerment.
Yeah, so just reach out. Like there might be a taxonomy committee associated with a portal, and we would just put you in touch with them. Or it might be kind of free for all, like, oh, thank goodness someone does taxonomy and we give you editing access. Ed.
I would like to make a comment about what goes into a taxonomic thesaurus within a portal. There's that depends on the portal itself. A lot of portals out there are very strict to what goes into the thesaurus. It's only published names, such as SciNet. SciNet rarely puts in a name that hasn't been published somewhere, but other portals like Invertibase, they deal with a lot of morphospecies. And if you have a morphospecies that's shared across the whole community, they've been entering those morphospecies into the thesaurus. And, but generally that's not done. So the name that you put associated with your specimen, you could put a morphospecies in there and then have it indexed just to the genus, but within the thesaurus, usually that morphospecies would not go in there, except for the case of Invertibase, where they have these morphospecies across the whole community.
Yeah, so different ways for different communities often, because sometimes morphospecies are widely known within a community, but not so much so in plants, for example. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and end this recording.